What a week it was for Pat Kelsey and the men's basketball team, but the Cardinals weren't finished. They got another commitment over the weekend. Noah Waterman for BYU. We break down what his role will be for the Cardinals on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And as always, I want to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Louisville men's basketball picked up yet another commitment over the weekend, that is. Pretty solid week. Momentum continued into the weekend. Noah Waterman from BYU is the latest Cardinals commitment. We'll talk about what he brings to the table, his potential role, etc. We'll answer the question, how will Louisville fill the last scholarship? There is a specific name that we will discuss, Power 5 player. And then to conclude the show, we will dive into a weekly mailbag segment. So, big time news. Personally, for me, heading into the week, I was really interested to see how Louisville was going to address the front court. It had been a couple of weeks or a week and a half since the Cardinals got the commitment from Chucky Hepburn and Abubakar Traore. They got the pledge from Kobe Rogers, but he's going to be missing the season due to an injury sustained in the previous NCAA tournament. But at that point, you had James Scott from Charleston, who I still think is going to play a role this season. And then you had some players that can play the four, Javon Hadley, Traore, etc. But in terms of front court numbers, really wasn't much there. I wanted Louisville to land one of the three of Kason Pryor, Kanaya Roots, and Noah Waterman. Pat Kelsey said, watch what I'm about to do next, and landed all three of them in the span of a week. Going from having a type of front court to okay. Pat Kelsey is continuing to cook. And I like, obviously, the additions of Pryor and Roots. And I really like this addition of Noah Waterman as well. One thing that stands out to me is, in terms of a potential concern, would be the defensive fit. Because neither Pryor nor Waterman are true rim protectors, although Pryor, his block rate suggests that he's a solid opportunistic secondary rim protector, but that he is extremely versatile, great on-ball defender. Although Waterman isn't as good of a rim protector, I don't think you can sleep on his ability to defend in the paint. He might spend a lot of his offensive minutes out on the perimeter, but being 6'11", 6'10", 220 pounds, he still can bang down low and defend, obviously, when he needs to. There is some concern with that defensive pairing because Pryor and Waterman are likely to start, you would think. But I do think that those are getting a little bit overblown. You might not have a true rim protector as a starting duo, but you have James Scott off the bench. You have a bunch of guys with pretty solid block rates that can be opportunistic shot blockers. That's probably the one thing that I wouldn't say worry about, but it does offer some small level of concern. But offensively speaking, man, this is going to be a challenging team to defend. You are looking at a starting lineup where all five guys are likely going to be able to shoot the ball and have some semblance of creating their own offense. Noah Waterman averaged 9.5 points per game, 5.4 rebounds per game for BYU this past season. Spent the past 2 2 years at BYU after transferring in, spending 2 seasons at Detroit Mercy. Arguably, I think he had his best college season considering the level of competition. Look, people will say Noah Waterman's not all that great of a player. The statistical numbers don't really back that up. Well, I would say that BYU was a balanced offense. Waterman averaged, let's call it 10 and 5, 9.5 and 5.4. Let's call it 10 and 5 for a balanced team in arguably the best conference in the country in the Big 12, best defensive conference, in my opinion, and did so on pretty solid shooting numbers. I mean, he shot 46% from the field, despite only just under 30% of his offense coming from around the rim. You say, well, why is the 6'11" guy not shooting all that well around the rim? He does. He shoots 66% from around the rim, but most of his offense doesn't come from the paint. So that shooting number isn't going to be as glamorous as a player who's spending most of his time in the paint. 37% from the three-point line on just under 5 attempts per game in the Big 12. That's really, really good. And then not to mention 81% from the free throw line. So you have a 6'11" forward that can excel in catch and shoot situations. He's 83rd percentile nationally, catch and shoot situations, 70% in spot up, and shot over 30% in both of the corners and both of the spots above the break. I think in 2 of those 4 spots, he shot over 40%, 37% on about 5 3-point attempts per game. That's really, really good, even considering the level of play. Again, you have your go-to scorers. You have Terrence Edwards. You have Cason Pryor. And even beyond that, you have multiple players that averaged over 8 points per game, 9 points per game at a Power 5 level. Chucky Hepburn from Wisconsin. Noah Waterman from BYU. Javon Hadley averaged 12 for Colorado. Corin Johnson averaged double figures for Washington. You have players that are going to be able to score the basketball. You don't need a guy that can score 20 a game. You need a player that can fill a role. And Noah Waterman fills a role for the Cardinals. He's a great three-point shooter. He has shown evidence of his ability to create his own offense off the dribble. He's a slasher as well, crafty offensive guy, deep offensive bag. And I like this addition. I like this fit next to Cason Pryor. Both can play inside. Both can step out and play on the perimeter as well. There's going to be a ton of switching. There's going to be a ton of off-ball movement. Screens are going to be incredible for this team. It's going to be challenging to guard Louisville. And Pat Kelsey is going out and getting players that fill the needs on the court. I mentioned that I think Waterman fits the role in which he's likely going to be asked to play. 88 percentile in transition. He moves really well for his size, being 6'11", sort of like Cason Pryor. Now, Pryor plays more like a guard than he does the 5 spot. Noah Waterman is sort of a hybrid, probably plays a little bit more like a 4 than a 3, and more so as a power forward than a 5. So what's his role going to be like? How do you – it's positionless basketball. Really, all you need to know is that Pryor and Waterman are both going to be playing in the front court. It's likely that Waterman will start. I guess there are situations in which he won't start. Now, we're going to discuss 3 possible starting lineups for the first game on tomorrow's episode of the show, so be on the lookout for that. But overall, it's versatility. And with versatility, you have a handful of different combinations of how players are deployed. And it depends on the personnel on the court. That's the good thing about bringing in Waterman, is that, like this edition, the editions of the past, you have guys that can play in multiple spots. I think Waterman can hold his own down low. I personally think you would imagine Cason Pryor is going to be relied upon to be more of a rim protector, and getting James Scott involved is going to be key too. But That's the one concern. If the only concern you can look at and say, well, rim protection, I think that speaks for itself. This is a good addition. So there are some out there that are saying that Noah Waterman is a lackluster addition. Some of those from a fan base that were actively tweeting that they would like Waterman to go to their said school. And it's kind of ironic how things get walked back, but it is what it is. A lot of fan bases do that all the time. Noah Waterman is a good basketball player. If you're telling me that one of your starting options is a veteran player that played at the Power 5 level and averaged 10 and 5, I'd say that that's probably an addition that you would welcome. So Waterman, distinguished three-point shooter, can create his own offense, has shown signs of being able to do that, does well in spot-up situations, catch and shoot, pick and pop type role that he will play. I'm very interested to see how this all fits on the court, but Louisville has done a great job this week of addressing the front court. Now there is one scholarship remaining. There is a specific player that's been mentioned over the past 12 to 24 hours as the most likely candidate to take that last spot. Nothing set in stone, but we will discuss who that is coming up here shortly after we tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Cardinal fans, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV and you have to continually find yourself turning down the volume because of all the shouting, you have an option to make a switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And then there was one scholarship remaining for the Louisville men's basketball program. It's been a wild road to get here. One scholarship remaining. There is one player that has been talked about as being the most likely option to take that spot. Before we do that, I want to update you a little bit on sort of the ins and outs of the podcast. People have been mentioning a background. I have had one on order. For some reason, it's been on back order, so I've had to pivot from that. This week, there will be another backdrop available, so you won't see an aesthetically unpleasing video. Also working to try to deal with the audio. The room that I'm recording in now is a little smaller, so there's been a little bit more of an echo. The sound quality's been off. Just know that I am working on that. I do apologize for the inconveniences, but just wanted to vocalize that and let y'all know that it is being worked on. Something also being worked on is filling that last scholarship for Louisville. Pat Kelsey has done a great job with the scholarships up until this point in filling the team, constructing a roster for next season. There is one more spot, and over the past 12 to 24 hours, one name has surfaced. That is Frank Anselem from Georgia. Now, I do want to clarify that his name is listed as Frank Anselem. I think it's Ibe, I-B-E. I could be saying that wrong. I haven't been able to find a place where that's pronounced. But some people just say Frank Anselem. On some of his profiles, it's Anselem-Ibe. We're going to go with Anselem. If I'm wrong on that, please forgive me. Native of Lagos, Nigeria. Transferred to Georgia, played the past 2 seasons there after spending 2 seasons in the ACC at Syracuse, his 4 seasons of college ball, the 6'10", 215-pound big man has not averaged over 3 points per game, nor has he averaged 15 minutes per game in any of the 4 seasons. Now, 2 things. Number one, this is not a confirmed addition. I think we need to go ahead and get that out of the way. There have been multiple places that have identified Anselem-Ibe as a possible player that could fill this spot. It is not confirmed. It's pure speculation at this point. So please don't run to social media and say, well, Dalton Pence of Locked On Louisville said that Frank Anselem is joining the team. I didn't say that. I said that most believe that he would be the last one to take a scholarship for Louisville, or the one to take the last scholarship, I should clarify. Anselem is down seemingly to Louisville and NC State. Number 2, I will say on this is that Anselem would fill a certain role for the Cardinals. And I think that that is sort of your back end of the rotation, situational minutes as a big man. I don't think he would, if let's say hypothetically, if he were to be brought in, do I think that he plays a major role? I do not. I think that he is playing a situational role to where he'll get minutes here and there, potentially at the end of the halves as guys are getting breathers. I think that, no disrespect, I don't think he is a major rotational piece for this team. The numbers speak for themselves. 3 points per game or under 3 points per game in all 4 college seasons. So the chances of seeing a major upswing in production, it's unlikely because he's already played 4 seasons. The older a player gets, the more unlikely it becomes that the trajectory would bounce up quickly and he would see a level of production that he's not used to at the college level. I will say that I wouldn't hate the addition. I wouldn't hate it at all. Because, look, you've filled 10 spots. You have 2 players for next season. And if you want a guy with Power 5 experience that has played multiple seasons in college and has a skill set that is sort of really what you're looking for in the front court, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with using the last scholarship on Frank Anselem. Because adding Kason Pryor, Kenai Ruths, and Noah Waterman makes this addition, I think, fairly reasonable to understand if he were to commit. Now, like I said, no confirmation that he is the guy. Louisville could still go elsewhere to fill that scholarship. Another thing is, even if he were to commit, there is still the whole question as to whether or not Kobe Rogers is actually going to be on scholarship this year. He could walk on, receive NIL to cover that scholarship, and be on scholarship for his final year of college eligibility in 2025-26 after he gets done redshirting due to rehabbing injury. At this point, like I said, we're going to operate under the hypothetical that he is going to be on scholarship because we haven't heard elsewhere. We'll wait for confirmation. Anselem, most of his offense is coming around the rim, 92%. In fact, he shoots 61% from around the paint. In his minutes, he does his role, which I think is to be a rim-running big man that excels in rebounding and putbacks and defense. He has a 7.9% block rate, so averaging 0.7 blocks per game in 9.1 minutes per game this year. I think that is pretty solid. Like I said, most of his offense is going to come from around the rim. He's got a 9.7 offensive rebounding rate, and he ranks in the 74th percentile in putbacks. So you know what you are going to get if you bring Frank Anselem onto the Cardinals team. You're getting a player that runs fairly well for his size, operates pretty much strictly around the rim offensively. Most of his offense are dunks, putbacks, layups, and there have been times where he's shown the ability to utilize that footwork to create his own offense. Then defensively around the rim, a situational shot blocker. So if you were one of those people that are complaining about rim protection, bringing in Anselem makes a lot of sense, because at this point you have to also understand from the perspective of, okay, you have 10 players that are going to play. 10 players that it's going to be hard to keep off the court. To play the other side of the argument, it's hard to convince another player to step into this team with a lot of production already accounted for and say, come join this team, because there's only so many minutes to go around. So again, if Frank Anselem is the last player joining, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with using the last scholarship on a rotational player that can be at the back end of the rotation and be a situational shot blocker and rim runner. Perfectly fine with that. It's the last scholarship. You have to have some context here, have to factor context in. It'd be different if he was being relied upon to be a starter, which I don't believe that to be the case. If it's the last scholarship and you're filling out depth and you're giving yourself some more insurance in the front court, I'm perfectly fine with that. So, again, we don't know if he's going to be the guy. It seems like he's rumored to be the guy, but we don't know yet. If he is the last commitment, I'm okay with it. If Louisville decides to go elsewhere with a backup guard, we'll see where they go. But at this point, that's sort of where things are at. So to conclude this episode of the show, we're going to dive into a weekly mailbag segment. Can't call it a Monday mailbag with this episode being released on Sunday. We'll answer some great questions here coming up shortly after we tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win on your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $100, $150, I should say, to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. For me, I'll let you in on what I've done for tonight, if you're listening to this beforehand. But with the Wolves and Denver Nuggets, I've taken the over of 199.5. And I've also taken Jamal Murray to score over 20 points. I think he's going to have a big-time game, and I think that there's going to be a lot of points scored, despite Minnesota having a great defense. But you can find this all on FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Be sure to utilize the opportunity at hand. The weekly mailbag has a couple of great questions in it that I'm actually really excited to answer, because I think we're getting to a great time at the end of the roster construction. There's baseball postseason coming up, etc. So we'll start on the baseball side of things. Louisville ended up sweeping Notre Dame to finish the regular season. They are in a pod with Miami, and I believe that says Clemson. But I scratched it out on my own thing. So that's absolutely fantastic. I believe that it is Clemson, but for some reason, like I said, I completely scratched it out. Yes, it's Clemson and Miami. I apologize for that. How do you feel about Louisville's chances to make the NCAA tournament? I think they're right on the bubble. I think it's like last four in type mentality. So it's critical that you succeed in this. You won the series against Miami. You were really competitive against Clemson. It's going to come down to pitching. The bats are going to be there, in my opinion. Louisville historically just hasn't really been all that great in the ACC tournament, and there's really no room for error with the pod system. I'm really glad that we didn't end up with North Carolina or Florida State, but Clemson is fairly good as well, not to mention. But Miami, I think that, you have to at least win one of the games. If you can get the win against Clemson, you do yourself a good service for the NCAA tournament resume. It's just a matter. I think if you advance to the knockout stages of the ACC tournament, I think you're in, just my opinion, but you still have to, handle business, because I feel like Louisville's right on the bubble at the moment. So which basketball edition do you feel like people are not talking about enough? I mean, it's a whole new team. So I guess you could go a couple different directions with this discussion. I'm going to go Rain Smith here. I think that for a player who led Charleston scoring with over 12 points per game, sharpshooter, underrated defender and facilitator. I think he's going to play a key role off the bench for the Cardinals, and sort of like that Ryan McMahon role, but he's not being discussed enough, in my opinion, when it comes to what he's going to bring to the team. And he already knows Pat Kelsey's system, so another aspect of things that he'll get overlooked. So I'm going to go with Rain Smith. You could go, like I said, man, a couple different ways. If it's not Rain, Corin Johnson, I think, is really primed for a breakout season. You could go so many different ways with this because there are legitimately going to be 13 new players. But I'm going to go with my choice of Rain Smith. James Scott is being talked about as a big-time piece for the Louisville front court. What do you think his role is going to be this season? Great question, because it's going to come up in conversation on tomorrow's episode of the show. I think Scott is going to be a rotational big man. Now, he has a ton of potential. Draft scouts talk about him being a future draft prospect. He is a really good shot blocker. He's really accurate around the rim, albeit most of his offense is dunks. I think what's next for him is to refine that footwork, to expand his offensive repertoire, and just become a very solid shot blocker and rim protector at the ACC level. I don't think he's a starter, at least not to start the season. I think that he's going to have a chance to prove himself. I think he's going to be a rotational player early on. But two things can be true at one time. He can have a ton of potential, but not be ready to start. I mean, he averaged, 5 points a game at Charleston. He's going to be taking a jump to the ACC. There's going to be, I'd say, a decent amount of getting used to playing Power 5 basketball. So I think he's going to play a key role as sort of the backup center, probably the true shot blocker for Louisville. But I don't think he's going to start right away. So that's my interpretation on how I feel his role is going to look like. Couple more questions. Who do you think is going to lead the team in starting or scoring? I apologize. Throw a dart at the board. That's my answer. I'm going to say, oh, man. It's between Terrence Edwards and Kason Pryor for me. I can see the cases made for both. I'm going to go Kason Pryor here. I thought he had a huge breakout season for South Florida, and I think that, he's going to get more and more comfortable playing high-level basketball, and I think he's going to be the leading scorer for this Louisville team. That's my intuition speaking, but you can go with either player. What is a realistic final destination for the team next season? I imagine you mean, like, how far do they need to get, or what's the realistic, like, end of the line journey? I think ceiling is Final Four. I think realistically you could say second weekend. Pat Kelsey's going to have to bring in 13 new players. These guys have to mesh. They have to play cohesively together. Pat Kelsey has to adapt to the Power 5 level of coaching, playing in the ACC. I think realistically speaking, there are pieces on this team that can lead you to a second round NCAA tournament appearance, or second weekend, I should say. I think second weekend is realistic. I don't want to go further than that, but I think making the tournament is definitely the expectation. Anything more than that is, I feel like, icing on the cake, depending on what Louisville does in the regular season. But for me, I'm going to go second weekend. But on tomorrow's episode of the show, like I said, we are discussing 3 possible starting 5 lineups for the men's basketball team, with the roster seemingly being filled coming up on tomorrow's episode of the show. Everyone, have a great day. Have a great start to your week. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.